elaborate more on disadvantages of majority communalism? And so you also talked about there being no glue which fits together the Hindu society, but like the caste things being there. But then you also talked about there being no split in the BJP party. How is it going on? And then it is based on the idea of religious identity. And then there has been no major split, no split in the party. How can the two things go simultaneously? And then you talked about religion. Sir, is religion something that is to be avoided when it is fulfilling many of the basic needs of humans? Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
माइक लो माइक।
मेरा आदित्य से कोई सवाल है। पहला सवाल, अगर हम पूरे कम्युनल पॉलिटिक्स का एक पॉपुलर रेस्पॉन्स देखें तो वो ये है कि एक हिंदू धर्म का कोई नैतिक पक्ष है उसके ऊपर बड़ी चोट हो रही है। जैसे अगर हम उदाहरण के लिए प्रकाश जोशी वाला हिंदू होने का धर्म या कैफी आदमी की नज्म जो 6 दिसंबर और इन सब पर है, तो एक तो ये जो सबसे पॉपुलर सेक्युलर रेस्पॉन्स है कम्युनल पॉलिटिक्स का, तो उसका क्या लिमिटेशन है। दूसरा सवाल, ऑर्थोडॉक्सी और कम्युनलिज्म का जो आपसी भिड़ंत अब हम देख रहे हैं उसका एक फिल्म आई थी धर्म 2007 में, जिसमें पंडित चतुर्वेदी और सूर्य प्रताप जो कम्युनल इंसान है उन दोनों के बीच में हम देखते हैं। जबकि आपका जो पूरा एम्फेसाइज है वो ये है कि उस ऑर्थोडॉक्सी से ही ये कम्युनलिज्म निकल के आ रहा है। और आज भी हम देख रहे हैं कि जो सेक्युलर पार्टीज है वो ये कह रही है कि जब भी उनसे पूछ रहे हैं कि आप राम मंदिर क्यों नहीं जा रहे, तो वो कह रहे हैं कि देखो शंकराचार्य भी नहीं जा रहे हैं, तो अब हमें पूछने का क्या। तो इस प्रकार के जो शॉर्ट टर्म पॉलिटिक्स है उसके ऊपर भी आप क्या सोचते हैं?
Any other question?
Yes, I have two questions. My first would be. Yeah. So, my first would be this. Professor Aditya, you talked about Hindu communalism at like a state level and its evolution. So, I'd just like to ask, if you'd have any further readings and suggestions on that. And Professor Ashin, you talked about communalism at an international level, and that same question extends, further readings on that. And lastly, it's Professor Aditya, you talked about how northeastern strategy specifically of the Hindu right, and how it seeks to polarize northeast. So we have the question of Manipur, where Hindu strategies have effectively turned that place into a place of this like conflict. And I was wondering if I wouldn't say ask for solutions per se, but if you have any speculations on how that same kind of Hindu those right-wing policies of separation, state separation, could affect places like Assam or Mizoram. So yeah, that's basically it.
State separation?
Sorry. State separation, in places like Mizoram, Assam, and Nagaland. How such strategies that they used in Manipur could extend to the northeast as a whole.
Okay. पहला तो आपका सवाल में I'll start with that and then I'll come to this. I have also one small response to the first question, which is primarily directed to Ajay. तो देखिए, ये जो सवाल है इनमें फर्क का जो सवाल है और जो उनके अंदर अंदरूनी जद्दोजहद है उसको किस तरह से समझा जाए, ये अपने आप में मेरे ख्याल से इसमें हम लोगों की सबसे बड़ी खामी रही। यहाँ थोड़ा सा मेरा अचिन से मतभेद ये है कि आई डोंट थिंक जो हम लोग सेक्युलर पॉलिटिक्स जिस तरह से करते आ रहे हैं उसमें हम लोगों का वो संवाद बन पाता है। तो दो तरह से संवाद बन सकता है। तो एक तो ये है कि आप जैसे लोहिया या लोहियाइट पॉलिटिक्स ने कोशिश की कि एक लिबरल हिंदू और एक कट्टर हिंदू, इन दोनों के बीच में संघर्ष चल रहा है, तो सारी लड़ाई सेक्युलरिज्म की जो है, ये सारी लड़ाई जो एक मॉडर्नाइजिंग उसकी है, वो दरअसल लिबरल हिंदू और कट्टर हिंदू के बीच की लड़ाई है, उसमें और किसी की कोई भूमिका रह नहीं जाती है। तो और उस क्रिएटिव है, लेकिन जैसा मैंने कहा, अगर ब्राह्मणिज्म से आपको सीखना है तो आपको एक स्ट्रैटेजी कोई नहीं चल सकती है। वो लोहियाइज्म भी जरूरी है, अम्बेडकरिज्म भी जरूरी है, लेफ्ट वाला कास्ट वाला वो क्लास वाला एंगल भी जरूरी है, सारी चीजें जरूरी है। तो वो जो मैं बात कह रहा था कि अगर आप ब्राह्मणिज्म के प्रोटियन कैरेक्टर को समझते हैं, जो बाद में हिंदुत्व के और आरएसएस के पॉलिटिक्स में दिखाई देता है कि हर जगह के लिए उनके पास एक अलग वो है। ये स्प्लिट न होने की वजह भी यही है कि एक्चुअली दे डोंट हैव, उनको एक लाइन नहीं चाहिए, उन्होंने छोड़ रखे हैं लोग अपने, एक ब्रॉड फ्रेमवर्क है। और जो ब्राह्मणिकल हेजिमनी का भी है कि वो 3-4 की चीजें हैं, उनको हाथ न लगाइए, बाकी आप जैसा भी है उसके हिसाब से अडेप्ट करते जाइए। अब यहां सवाल ये होता है कि हमारे जैसों को क्या संवाद बनता है। हम लोग जो मान लीजिए मार्क्सिस्ट हैं, लेफ्ट पॉलिटिक्स करते हैं वगैरह वगैरह, तो हम अचानक शंकराचार्य की भाषा नहीं बोल सकते। हम लोग धर्म की भाषा, ये इट्स नॉट एन इंस्ट्रूमेंटल क्वेश्चन एंड इट विल नॉट एवर कैरी दैट वेट। अगर हम लोग अचानक धार्मिक होकर धार्मिक जबान में बात करने लगेंगे तो उसका कोई असर नहीं होगा। तो वहां पे एक्चुअली इट इज अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ एस्टैब्लिशिंग कनेक्शंस एंड लिंक्स विद वट एवर इज गोइंग ऑन। जो किस मुकाम पे, किस स्ट्रगल पे आप किन फोर्सेस को अफर्म कर सकते हैं। जहां पे मेरा अपना मानना यह है कि एक बहुत की लड़ाई इसमें वो है जो ऑलरेडी चल रही है, मतलब हमारी देन नहीं है, वो लड़ाई चल रही है जो फूले अम्बेडकर पेरियार का जो ट्रेडिशन है, और उसके अंदर से अब एक नया फेज शुरू हुआ। रीसेंट वक्त की अगर बात करें तो नया फेज ये है कि ये लड़ाई अब एक तरह से एक नए, मतलब यू आर एक्चुअली विटनेसिंग द इन्वेंशन ऑफ अ काउंटर ट्रेडिशन, दलित बहुजन काउंटर ट्रेडिशन, जो आपको महिषासुर से लेकर तमाम तरह के रीइंटरप्रिटेशंस जो हो रही हैं उसमें दिखाई देता है कि अभी तक जिन चीजों को डायरेक्टली चैलेंज नहीं किया गया था वो अब ये फुले अम्बेडकर पेरियार ट्रेडिशन से चैलेंज हो रहा है। उसके साथ आपका संवाद है या नहीं है, बन सकता है नहीं है, ये सवाल है, कैसे बन सकता है, उसके साथ कितना ज्यादा हम लोग रिश्ता बना सकते हैं। वहां पे रिलीजियस आर्टिकुलेशन नहीं है, लेकिन वहां मिथ और माइथोलॉजी की जमीन पर लड़ाई भी है। इन दोनों को कंफ्यूज नहीं कर सकते हैं। जो प्योरली रिलीजियस है, शंकराचार्य है, उनके थियोलॉजिकल सवाल हैं, वो उसमें हमारा कोई दखल हो नहीं सकता जाएगा। बट द पॉइंट वेयर द ऑनगोइंग स्ट्रगल अगेंस्ट ब्राह्मणिकल हेजिमनी in its current form, that is where I think absolutely essential for us and for the the Ambedkarite stream also, to establish, as I think in a recent book edited by AISA-JNU and Anant Tumre, they have also argued for the radical in Ambedkarite tradition connecting with with a certain kind of reinterpreted Marxism. So that responsibility is ours. How does the left establish that dialogue, which Teltumde and AISA-JNU are arguing for there, or I can see Harish also here, whose writing I keep reading, who also has been raising questions about how one has to get out of that restrictive thing. That is one part which is going on in that tradition. But in the left tradition also it is going on, but I think it needs more articulation and concrete bridges have to be built. Thank you. I think it became longer than I expected.
Let me just, I thought I made clear that religion will always be a powerful force, and that there's absolutely nothing wrong with people wanting to be religious for various reasons and all. I thought I made that clear, if you like. Precisely because of what I said, okay? However, the relationship between secular and the religious is not one of elimination, but of the terms of coexistence. And those terms of coexistence will have to be different from the past, where religion was much more all-encompassing, and this is a reality. The economy of India is based upon rules and all, which don't have to do with religious custom laws. This is the same thing in a capitalist society like Iran, right there. Similarly, politically, it is important that you have certain basic rights that are there for everybody, regardless of religion and so on. The difference between modernity and that here. So I think that terms of coexistence is very important here. The other aspect, of course, is that the question of majority communalism, minority, I thought I made it clear that majority communalism is very dangerous because it can encompass nationalism. And if you have a political force which is spreading its hegemony, if you like, then it is spreading its hegemony in various ways. Not just through secular needs, laboratory, this, that, whatever, but also through its influence in culture in various ways and so on. For example, if you're talking about this government, what is this government doing? It is doing four things. It is seeking to eliminate or subordinate all electoral competitors. It is, if you like, ghettoizing and inferiorizing and doing worse to certain religious minorities, and even attacking those who are liberals or left dissidents and so on, who would be opposing them, right? It's going in the direction of ideological homogenization, which means a particular focus on the press, private and public, and on education, and on the film industry, Bollywood, which has been made in India. And fourth and most important, the suborning of the institutions of democracy. In particular, election commission, bureaucracy, and most important of all, the judiciary. So if you are going to fight against this, you have to fight on these levels, all of these levels here. With regard to the question of the battle of ideas and the struggle on the culture front, I actually don't believe that you should be preoccupied with the question of emphasizing secularity and secularism in the current debate. Because if you see that and you emphasize that, for explanation purposes, elite level, okay. But be careful not to come across as encouraging the idea that you are anti-religious. The most important way to move forward is to focus on questions of democracy, dignity, and material needs. And in order for you to successfully do that, you provide alternatives at different levels here. Aditya's talked about the caste issue, fine, all the rest. I would emphasize one aspect, insofar as you also prioritize the question of economy being important. You have to have a perspective of how to fight against the economy, which affects everybody, regardless of their caste, religion, and whatever. Then you have to fight against all oppressions. How do you bring working people together to fight collectively at the economic front, at the material front? You cannot do it without taking up all the other issues. So you have to take up all of the other issues, but keep in mind that this is a particular weak spot which is going to get even weaker because you have great inequalities of income and wealth, and which is something that can unify. To my doctor friends, I'm saying, let's come and let the left establish a kind of health plan which goes beyond this whole bloody question of 80% of healthcare having to come from the private sector, and to move towards that. And this is something that can, and I'm telling you that if you have a Muslim doctor and they say, it doesn't matter. Most people will just want to be cured. So my emphasis is much more on those aspects here, and on the question of democratization, and finally, on the question of cadres. Movements to follow this thing, but we have to build cadres, in my view, of a kind that will be implanted and can get connected here. The organizational aspect. Some people say parties and movements. Movements, parties. Some say, let the movements come together, networking. Historically, we have found that the party is the one particular organization which seems to have a larger vision and has its fingers everywhere, like a spider. But not just one party. You may have to think about parties which are progressive coming together in various ways, about how you can link with movements. But movements have traders and activists in that particular sector, and that particular issue. The party has the advantage of a larger vision and different people involved differently and coming together and sharing their experiences, which is why I emphasize the question of that, but not ignoring or opposing the idea of others. That would be my way of
Please, Chandra.
Just a small distinction at that Northeast question. The separation that you said, I think that is just it expands. Every specific condition they have a separate discourse, the separate way of approaching and so on. It's not specific to the Northeast. So there would be one kind of things when it's not even specific to areas, it may be linguistic areas, it may be whatever, but that I think they're very sensitive to the specificity of the local situation. That is what I was saying. About readings, we'll talk on email perhaps.
Yeah, just one last point I have to say, it struck me. In Assam, you have had opposition for particular reasons against the CAA, as you know that, huh? But let me just say something about the CAA, which I think is important. The CAA has been directed against religious minorities in 3 Muslim majority countries, correct? Huh? For Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, and then you've added Parsis and Christians as a kind of cover here. But isn't it interesting that there is one neighbor in which Hindus have been oppressed and are persecuted, but that doesn't get in the CAA. Do you know what country that is? Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, the Jaffna Tamils, who are predominantly Hindu, have been persecuted, but they are not entitled to CAA. Why? Because the purpose of CAA is to focus on those Muslim majority countries. And if you say that a Buddhist majority country like Sri Lanka is guilty of persecuting a religious minority, then some people might say, Buddhist country? Muslim countries, of course. But then, does it mean that a Hindu majority country could be guilty of persecuting its own people? My point here is that very interesting that Sri Lanka doesn't come into the category of CAA and what it indicates.